Hello everybody, Chef Bob here today, and we're going to make barbecue beef brisket. We're going to start with a full beef brisket. We're going to trim it, we're going to inject it with some marinade, then we'll put a dry rub, put it in the smoker, leave it smoke for a couple of hours, pull it out, wrap it, put it back in to finish it off, and then slice it up. Let's get started. So here we have a full beef brisket. This is about 17.5 pounds. It's a Black Angus beef brisket. And it's looking pretty good. I'm not going to do too much trimming. I see a small piece of hard fat I'm going to remove here. And not too much else, maybe a little right here. So let's get started on trimming this up. Okay, this is good. There's a hard piece of fat right here. Typically what I want to do is try to remove the fat that has a very hard texture to it, because a lot of that won't render down. You want to leave some fat, but not too much. Okay, as you see, that's just a pure piece of fat. I'm going to leave this. This is thin and it's soft, so I'm going to leave that to keep the juice in. That will render down. There's a harder piece of fat in here, but I don't want to cut that off at this point in time. I may trim a little bit more from the same spot over here. It actually wasn't as much as I thought. So let's turn it over and see what we have on the other side. So here's a piece of hard fat, and this is the type I removed. The little bit of piece of fat like that you want to leave on there. But it's just when you have a very large, thick piece, what happens is, because on the thick fat, you can put rub on the outside of it, but when you eat it, you're not going to want to eat all of this fat, and the flavoring of the rub will not go through this into the meat. So you want some fat, but not too much. We'll take a little more of this off. And maybe we'll go one more time, see if I can get just a little bit more of this off. I'm trying to do this so you can see on the camera how much I'm trimming. And this is you can feel the difference. This is a very hard type of fat, as opposed to some of the softer pieces of fat. And here's a little bit right here. I'll just trim this off as long as I'm trimming. Okay. And otherwise, this is pretty good. There's no fat here. A little bit in here I'll leave in there. And this is just a thin piece of fat. So there you go. So we'll put that aside. And now what I'm going to do is create my injectable marinade. So what we'll do is, we'll do what we've done in other videos. We'll start with, and you base it on how much meat you have. This is a rather large piece, so I'm going to make a little more marinade than if it were a smaller piece. Again, this is about 17.5 pounds Black Angus beef brisket. I have approximately 1.5 cups of barbecue sauce. And just use your favorite barbecue sauce. You can make your own from scratch, but I've just used some pre-packaged barbecue sauce, and I'm also using 1.5 cups of apple juice. So it's just a 1-to-1 mixture, and I'll whisk it together. So that's very easy to make. Okay, and now what I'll do is I'm going to transfer it to this taller cylinder to make it easier to fill our injector. Now I'm using the marinade injector, and I'm using the needle with the multiple holes as opposed to the single hole tip. This will allow us to get the marinade in there in more locations. It'll make it a little easier to use. So let's just see if we can get this going. Okay, make sure it's on there tight. And now you'll just go, as we've done on other videos, we'll just go through the meat evenly, sort of in a crosshatch or a grid pattern. The idea is just get the marinade evenly throughout the meat. And I'll show you a little bit on camera here, and then I'll finish it. Let's see. And you might be able to see it pump up as I inject. Whoops. There we go. And before, when you see it come out, don't panic. You're going to have some that leaks out. And you just want to try to go, throughout the meat. I'll do a little more. Okay. Naturally, the thicker piece you'll want to inject a little more, because you're trying to get that flavor throughout the meat. So when you smoke it and slow cook it, barbecue it, that flavor will be throughout the meat. So I'm going to continue doing this, and then once I'm finished I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll apply the dry rub. Okay everybody, we're back. I finished putting the injectable marinade through our beef brisket. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some dry rub on it, but when I put this in my smoker, this is very large and I want to get a better distribution of smoke throughout my smoker. So I'm actually going to cut this in half just to make it easier to handle. Okay. Now we'll take some of our dry rub, and you can make your own dry rub. This just a purchased rub. I have a pre-made rub, and I'm just gonna sprinkle it, all over. I'll do 1/2 first, just to show you, and get all the surfaces of it. And then I'll rub this in, as you see. This is going to give us our nice flavorful bark when it smokes. And just, go over all of your edges. Rub it in. Get a good coating. And I'm going to continue doing this on the second half, and then we'll be right back and I'll show you what it looks like before we put it in the smoker. Okay everybody, we're back. I finished putting the dry rub on both halves of the Black Angus beef brisket. And now I brought out my grill pans, which you may have seen me use in other videos. They have slots in the bottom to allow the smoke to come up through. I like to use them because it's easier to handle the pork or beef brisket, whatever you're making, inside the smoker or your grill. So I like to use these. They have a non-stick coating inside. So now I'm just going to put our marinated and dry rubbed beef brisket in the grill pans. There you go. So now you can see it's going to be a lot easier to handle these. So the next step is to put them in the smoker for about, I would say, 6 hours. Then we'll pull them out, wrap them up, finish them for maybe another 6, 8, 10 hours, and slice them up. I'll meet you outside at the smoker. Okay everybody, here we are. We're ready to put our beef brisket in the smoker. So let's see where we're at. We should be up to temperature. I already have some hickory chips in there. Okay. And you can see again we're marinated, dry rubbed in the barbecue pans. There. We should be all set. So we'll check that in a couple of hours and see how it's going. Okay everybody, we're back. It's the next day. We finished smoking our beef brisket low and slow. We had it at about 225 degrees in the smoker, and we ran it for about 16 hours. And if you recall, it was an 18-pound beef brisket, a Black Angus beef brisket. We cut it in half so it would fit in our smoker, and we did 225 for about 16 hours. I didn't wrap it this time. I just kept it low and slow, and we had a water pan in the smoker. So as you see, it's cooled off now. And this is how it looked coming out of the smoker. It was in our grill pan. At that point, when I took it off of the smoker, it was a little over 200 degrees internal. You typically want to shoot for at least 190 internal, and for a brisket, 200 is pretty good to get it super tender and ultra tender. What I did at that point was I grabbed some cast iron pans, porcelain coated cast iron. I then transferred it. Now this is when I took it out of the smoker. I'm just showing you what I had done. I took it out of the smoker. I then put it into one of the cast iron pans, and I put the lid on it, and this was to leave it rest. And you could feel the heat come off, and it warmed up the pan. It was warm for quite some time, and that was several hours ago, so now it's totally rested and cooled. What I'll do now is we'll carve it and see how it turned out. So if you recall, this was the larger half. If you can see that on camera, and you can see there's a lot of juice in here. And we'll carve up this piece. Let me just get the lids out of the way. So we'll take this, and what you'll want to do is you'll want to carve it against the grain. Let me see how the grain, okay. And I'll try to do this on camera for you. Okay. And now, we'll take our brisket knife. And the grain is going, I can see it, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, you can see the grain going this way. So we'll want to cut across the grain. So it would be like this. So we'll cut it like this. And you want to cut it about the thickness of a pencil. Oh, I can tell it's tender already, just the way it's starting to fall apart as I cut. Here we go. You can see it fall apart as the bark you can see the bark's a little hard because I left it set, so it's a little hard to cut through. But look at this. You can see how tender. Now this is the thinner piece of the two, and you can see it's almost, you would call it over tender because it's just falling apart. Ideally, cutting it at this thickness, it should hold its shape, and as you can see, it's not. In fact, that's why it's so tender. I'm having a little bit of a difficulty cutting it with the traditional knife. We'll use this knife and see how it turns out. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. Yeah, this is falling apart tender. So this would be great if you would just put some sauce on this and put it on a sandwich. It's similar to a pulled pork or pulled beef type of consistency. Let's try a little bit. Mmm. Very, very good. Mmm. Now let's try to carve a piece off of this one. See how this one holds up. Can't quite tell where the grain is. Let's see. Oh, yeah. You can see the difference right away. Since this was the thicker piece, okay, you can see this is more of the proper consistency. You can see it's still very tender, but it held up. That's because this was a thicker piece. I should have taken this one off a little sooner, but I didn't. And you can see this is what you want. This is the way it holds together, but you can see it's very, very tender. And that's what you want. So there you have it. We've made delicious smoked barbecue beef brisket, and we injected it with a marinade. We dry rubbed it, smoked it for about 16 hours. It's very delicious. I recommend you try it at home. Thank you for watching. I gotta have some more of this. This one, you can't beat it. This is phenomenal. This one right here, phenomenal. Let me try this. These are what you call burnt ends. Oh, baby. Delicious.